Hey, what's up guys, Riff here. So today is the day a lot of people have been waiting for. Nijisanji and ANYCOLOR have released their financial results for quarter 4 of 2024, and a lot of people have been anticipating this release because it covers the last couple of months, which have been very turbulent for Nijisanji EN in particular. And to sum up the results of this report, we're going to see some very happy people at Nijisanji Japan, but also a lot of very disappointed people over at Nijisanji EN because it was pretty brutal on their end. Now, before we get into this, let me remind us of quarter 3. And I do this for two reasons. Number one, you can see here that there was a 40% decrease in revenue when you compare quarter 3 of 2023 versus quarter 3 of 2024. Now, you also might notice that they separated the branches. You have a separate graph for Nijisanji Japan and one for Nijisanji EN. So you can actually see the decreases from quarter to quarter. However, notice this in the new quarter 4 report. They have changed how they're showing the data. Where they had separate graphs for the two branches here, they have now consolidated them under one branch to basically lighten the blow of the Nijisanji EN decreases in revenue. So let's look at the quarter 4 report here. So as you can see, Nijisanji Japan is in the red here, and the pink is Nijisanji EN. And you can see right here, they boldly report a 47% increase in revenue when you compare quarter 4 of 2023 versus quarter 4 of 2024. However, all of that increase is attributable to Nijisanji Japan. None of it is attributable to Nijisanji EN because once again, and for the 4th time in 2024, they had a decrease in revenue compared to last year. So you can see now, you can compare the quarters here. Every single quarter for Nijisanji EN this year was a decrease in revenue when compared to the quarters of last year. In fact, the lowest performing quarter for Nijisanji EN in 2023 was quarter 4, but that quarter still generated more revenue than any of the quarters of 2024. Obviously not a very good sign. And when you're looking at this stuff, it's obvious that the Japanese branch would generate more revenue overall because they have more livers. I believe they have about 4 times as many livers as the EN branch. However, as you might notice overall, the Japanese branch, despite remaining relatively the same size as the previous year, saw almost a double in their total revenue from 2023 to 2024. And Nijisanji EN also remained pretty much the same size in terms of their livers, and yet they decreased overall. It's not a very good look, so let's get into it. And probably the worst thing Nijisanji and ANYCOLOR have done at this point is make me do math because they don't want to show the actual decreases by quarter for Nijisanji EN, so you basically have to crunch the numbers yourself. But here they are. So when comparing 2023 to 2024, quarter by quarter for Nijisanji EN, in quarter 1, there was a decrease in revenue by 16.3%. In quarter 2, there was a decrease by 12.8%. In quarter 3, there was a 40.3% decrease. And in quarter 4, the latest, there was another 21.7% decrease in revenue when comparing quarter 4 of last year versus this year. That is not good. 4 quarters all decreasing in revenue when compared to the quarters of last year. That is a very tough set of data for them. And on top of that, if you look at the revenue from quarter 3 versus quarter 4 of this year, there was a decrease by almost 8% in revenue. And quarter 4 was a big push for Nijisanji EN. They had a very high level of activity and promotional events, and they tried really hard to generate extra revenue, and they still earned less than the previous quarter of this year. In fact, you can see some of the coping in the report here. So they basically do an overview of the 4 different revenue sources, and they say right in the live streaming portion that compared to the previous quarter, membership and advertising revenue remained flat. Super Chat decreased as a reaction to the increased influence by Nijisanji Festival in December. They are saying that the reason there is a decrease in Super Chats is attributable to people spending their money on Nijisanji Festival in December. Nothing about any of the stuff that's happened over the past couple of months. They are completely ignoring everything. And that is the fault of Nijisanji management right there, because in the past, people have been upset with Nijisanji management. But this time around, with the termination of Selen and the joint statement made by Alira Pandora, Ike Eveland, and Vox Akuma, as well as a lot of the livers from the EN branch sharing that message, people are not just mad at the management anymore. They're mad at the livers too, because management basically pushed them in front of a camera and made them the target of a lot of people being upset. And what happens? They lose revenue. They lose support because people are now mad at the livers, and it's reflected by the decrease in super chat revenue. On top of that, you can see this commerce right here, and it might surprise you guys. Look at the revenue from live streaming versus commerce. They make the majority of their revenue through commerce, which includes things like merch and digital products, which is even worse because when you think about it, when it comes to merch, clearly the biggest revenue generator for Nijisanji, the livers only get 2%. This is a great scam, ladies and gentlemen, like the biggest portion of all the revenue, and they get 2% from the merch. It's absolutely crazy, but they tried really hard in quarter four to boost as much commerce as possible, and they admit that in this quarter four report, saying that they tried to increase the level of commerce and other things to jolt some life into Nijisanji, in particular Nijisanji EN, and it didn't really work. They still lost revenue as compared to last year's fourth quarter, and they lost revenue compared to quarter three of this year. Now, moving forward, we do have this information here where we can see side by side the total revenue earned by Nijisanji EN in 2023 versus 2024. And if you do the math, their revenue, their overall revenue decreased by 24%. Now, I have seen people on Twitter, the usual Niji sisters, trying to act like that decrease is not a big deal when it's a very big deal. Imagine your salary generating less than, or 24% less than the previous year. You would notice a big difference. So 24% less revenue when comparing the 2 years is a huge drop off. And when you look at this, right, this isn't a Nijisanji problem. This is a Nijisanji EN problem because Nijisanji Japan blew up. They have almost doubled their revenue from the previous year. And you can see the quarter differences. Some of the quarters, they nearly doubled their revenue of the previous quarter from 2023. But Nijisanji EN stagnated. Like I said, the worst quarter of 2023 was better than any of the revenue from this year's set of quarters. So what's going on here? Because even if you look at the number of livers, everyone knows the Japanese branch has more livers. Therefore, they're just going to end up with more revenue as a total number just by the size of that branch. However, if you look at the size of the branches, they increase pretty much at the same rate. You know, Nijisanji EN versus the Japanese branch. So there isn't like a big disparity in what was added to each branch in terms of the number of livers. And yet, the Japanese branch almost doubled their revenue, and the EN branch lost a percentage of their revenue. They went down by 24%. That's weird. That's really weird. And it's not like it was one really bad quarter. It was 4 disappointing quarters for the EN branch. There's no other way of looking at this. So I don't really know what the excuse is for this disproportionate level of support for the Japanese branch versus the EN branch that is struggling despite both sides pretty much keeping the same size of roster between the last 2 years. And looking through the rest of the report, you can see some of their outlooks for the first quarter of 2025, and it seems very clear what they're going to do, and that is to focus on commerce. That seems like that is their biggest focus, and that makes a lot of sense because it was by far their biggest revenue generator for this year. And you can see they're focusing on a plan to release various anniversary goods, music content, seasonal content, etc. And even comparing that to the NBA collab that a lot of people are talking about, this seems like a much bigger focus with the commerce than the promotional events. And promotion only generates a very small portion of their revenue. So it's kind of interesting to see that something like this doesn't really amount to a whole lot in terms of revenue. But with the commerce, the merch, and all that stuff, that is their biggest generator, and that's what they're focusing on for quarter one, which makes a lot of sense. But going through the report, we also have some interesting sustainability measures that they're taking, including this response to defamation issues. We've seen previous things happen with cease and desist and takedowns of YouTube videos, whether these were good ideas or not. They've always taken some countermeasures to what they believe is defamation or something that is harming their talents, in many cases, the truth. But anyways, here's their statement saying this: "We have established a countermeasure team for offensive and defamatory behavior to appropriately respond to defamatory and offensive actions against VTubers belonging to ANYCOLOR, to systematically implement countermeasures against defamatory and offensive actions. We have established the Anti-Defamation Study Group with video streaming and posting platform operators, creator-affiliated companies, and experts to share information among stakeholders and make policy proposals to the government." Now, this is very interesting. It seems like a much more aggressive approach here, but I don't really think this is going to amount to a whole lot. We did see a recent cease and desist go out to Raziel, who had made some statements about Luca Kaneshiro. So maybe that is the product of this new study group. I don't know why they're called that, but that is the kind of stuff you should expect. If they start going after a wider net than that, like how they have done copyright takedowns on people like False ID and Kyo, that's a really bad approach, and that's going to be another PR disaster. So hopefully they don't get too comfortable doing this stuff and only hitting it when it seems actually appropriate. But moving on and concluding this video, I mean, this is obviously a pretty crazy report here, and once again, the Japanese branch doing really, really well and expanding really fast, and the EN branch lagging behind despite adding new members, still seeing an overall decrease by 24% in revenue this year. But for now, that is going to do it for this video. It'll be interesting to see how the stocks respond to this. And as always, feel free to share your thoughts about today's topics in the comment section down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.